I show you something.
Yes, Evert. I have one. I have one.
Spanish book. Oh, this is wonderful.
Excellent. Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent. Yes.
I'm going to start to record, and we are now streaming live via YouTube. So, Alejandro, if you want to start.
Yes. Recording in progress. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon for everyone. My name is Alejandro Esteves. I am the director of the CDO of the University of Buenos Aires. It's a pleasure for me to introduce Professor Evert Vedung. He has a PhD in political science from Uppsala University, Sweden, and he is Professor Emeritus in political science and housing policy in the Institute for Housing and Urban Research and Department of Government at Uppsala University since 2005. He was invited professor in Universidade Federal Fluminense and in Universidad de Brasilia in the Escola Nacional de Administração Pública, Brazil, during the period 2013-2017. He wrote in 1997, Public Policy and Program Evaluation, a great book I have here, example for you, great book. And that book was translated into Spanish in that book. So he also wrote numerous articles on public policy, program evaluation, and public housing. And among the most cited, we find the 1998 Policy Instruments, Typologies and Theories, edited by Evert Vedung in the book Carrots, Sticks, and Sermons, Policy Instrument and Their Evaluation. And for the comments, we have a close friend, Guadalupe Dorna. Guadalupe is the director of Master Public Policy Program in School of Government of University Torquato Di Tella. She has a Master in Public Administration and International Development from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. She has also a degree in economy in the University Torquato Di Tella. So we are going to start. Evert, you will have approximately 40-45 minutes to speak if you want. Then Guadalupe will make some comments for about 10 minutes. And Guadalupe will choose 3 questions from the chat to make forever. And Evert Vedung. So let's start, Evert. We commence. I will make the PowerPoint for you.
Okay, thank you very much, Alejandro. Buenos dias, todos. I have never been to Buenos Aires. I have actually been to Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil. And I saw a sign there saying 1,500 kilometers Buenos Aires or something. And that's the closest I have been. But actually in my youth, up north in Sweden, some people became sailors, and they sailed from Gothenburg city in Sweden to an amazing city in Argentina, Buenos Aires. And also we had meat from Argentina at this time. This was at the end of the Second World War. It was in the 1940s and 50s. We had some corned beef from Argentina, and I thought it must be a lovely country that can produce us good food. Anyway, I will talk to you today about 5 waves of evaluation diffusion in the Atlantic world between 1960 and 2022. It's a rather long period of time. It's 60 years of time. So I have to be kind of superficial. But anyway, I will give you an overview of the various waves that has diffused across the Western world, or the Atlantic world, as I formulated here. To me, can you take the next? this is my contact information. Next picture. I will build my speech today on an article called 4 Waves of Evaluation Diffusion, published in the journal Evaluation in 2010. And a short version of this is published in the European Evaluation Society newsletter. It's 2 pages long, so it's not very long. The journal Evaluation, by the way, is a very good one. It's pan-European. It's not only the British that publish there. Every country, the Italians, for instance, and the Spanish publish there, and so on. So it's a good journal. Maybe you can have publish yourself there, or have a look also at this particular journal Evaluation, published in London. Okay, next picture. I will start with a definition of evaluation. To me, conceptual knowledge is very important in political science and also in public policy evaluation. So I will define evaluation here as an assessment that is a scrutiny of the merit of interventions to fight, to solve and mitigate problems, from which recipients are supposed to learn something and improve the evaluated intervention or other interventions, and more. Next picture. The focus of evaluation is on human intervention to change the world. This is the most basic idea in my definition. Of course, you can evaluate, for instance, a mountain. You can evaluate the mountain Aconcagua in Argentina and say, this is a beautiful mountain. It's the highest in Latin America. It's the highest actually in the Americas. It's a very high mountain, 7,000 meters or something. But this is not the kind of evaluation I'm talking about, evaluation of mountains or evaluation of persons. We'll talk about evaluation of interventions. And what is an intervention? It is a mixture of 2 Latin words. Inter, which means between in Latin. International means between nations. Intervention, vention in Latin is the verb venire, meaning to come. So an intervention is the same as a between coming, so to say. And a between coming and intervention is something that the state, the government is doing in order to improve the world. You have it, for instance, in the French verb venir, je viens, tu viens, il vient, and so on. And in the Portuguese, vir. I have been in Brazil, actually. So an intervention is a between coming, an activity coming between, an interference. And this is what evaluation is about. It's about an assessment. They try to evaluate the goodness or badness of interventions. Next picture. To me, evaluation is not one thing. Alejandro showed us my book in Spanish. I think I have 10 models of evaluation in that. Evaluation is just not one model, so to say. Evaluation are very many models. There are many models of evaluation, not only economic models for efficiency and productivity. There are many other models like client-oriented evaluation, stakeholder evaluation, side effects evaluation, and so on. And there are also many waves of evaluation that have swept across the Atlantic world since the 1960s. This is my first proposition. 5 evaluation waves have swept the Atlantic world in these 60 years. I haven't investigated Argentina, not even Brazil, but I argue this anyway, and maybe you will recognize some of the ways anyway, because an interesting thing with the waves is that all 5 of them have left layer upon layer of deposits that together form the present megatrend. I call it a megatrend, public policy evaluation. It's one of the big trends in the societies today, evaluation. And these 5 waves have left traces, I'm sure, to some extent also in Argentina, certainly in the European Union, in countries in the European Union, like, for instance, Italy, like, for instance, the Netherlands, and so on. Next picture. This is the 5 waves are the following. Wave number 1, the science-driven wave. Second, dialogue-oriented wave. Wave 3, new public management, neoliberal wave. Number 4, evidence-based wave. Number 5, new public governance wave or collaborative governance wave. I will talk about these 5 waves. Next picture. I will start with the science-driven wave. This wave started in the beginning of 1963, in the beginning of the 1960s. In my country has had all the 5 waves, actually. And I think the science-driven wave started already in the 1950s. But in the United States of America, we can even date it exactly. It started in 1963. And the idea behind the science-driven wave is that public policy should be made more scientific or science-like. You know, this is an effort behind this wave. Evaluation should be conducted by scientists and university-educated scientists, basically. It should not be about goals, because goals are outside of science. Goals should be set by politicians and the other elected officials. Evaluation, on the other hand, should be about means to attain goals given by others. The goal attainment model was the basic one in the 1960s that everyone propagated. Next picture. I think all of us recognize this idea. It's based on means ends rationality, which is still very common in the social sciences. Take economics, for instance. It's very much based upon the difference between means and ends. It's called, in my discipline, political science, we call it the classical theory of administrative science. And it goes like this. Ends or goals are value-driven expressions of value. They cannot be proven scientifically to be true. It's outside the realm of science, the ends and goals. But selection of means, that is instruments, policy instruments to reach the ends, on the other hand, they are considered value neutral. That is considered a value neutral scientific enterprise. You can do science about means, but not about goals. Choice of the most efficient means to attain a given goal can in principle be ascertained in an objective fashion by scientific procedures. This is the idea, the basic idea. And I think you all recognize it. It is still around. It came as an idea in the 1960s, and it is still around in many disciplines, but also in public policy evaluation. And the best thing to make politics more scientific would be to use RCTs. That is randomized controlled experimentation with an experimental group and a control group and so on. You give the intervention to the experimental group, you measure before and afterwards, and you give no intervention to the control group, you measure afterwards and before and so on. And then you can find out the effect of this particular intervention. This is the basic idea, RCTs. And professors must do this, because only professors can do RCTs, not ordinary people. The evaluation was for professors, was for academics. Next picture. This comes from Max Weber, the famous German sociologist. I think he died in 1922. It's exactly 100 years ago. So it's very typical of him. If you look at the last lines here, it's from Max Weber, but also from the famous Austrian positivists. You know, the famous positivists in the Austrian Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, at the end of the Second World War, or maybe immediately before the Second World War. Rudolf Carnap, for instance, Kurt Gödel. I have written Anton Menger, it should be Karl Menger. You know, the discovery of the marginal utility idea in economics, for instance. All these believed in this means-ends rationality. Next picture. That was the first. Well, I can also say this. How is it in real public policy? This is kind of remarkable, because in real public policy, means are often contested and goals are not contested. For instance, the political parties in Argentina may be united behind a certain behind a certain goals, but not about means. So it's the other way around in public policy. For instance, good childcare, good elder care. The parties are united behind this. This is very good for all of them, from the left to the right. But should good childcare go via the public sector? Should it go via the private sector? There you have the disunities between the parties. So in public policy, it's quite the other ways around. Goals are contested. No, goals are, accepted by everyone, unity, but the means are contested. This is kind of funny. Next picture. The second wave it started after the 1968 Paris Revolution, the youth rebellion, you remember, and it started seriously in the 1970s, and I have called it the dialogue-oriented wave. And this is very different from the scientific wave, because first of all, people started to argue that evaluation should be democratic. It shouldn't be scientific. Evaluation should be made by the common man, not the academic man. Evaluation is something that has to do with democracy. Evaluation should be pluralistic, like it is in democracies. We have 8 parties in my country, and you have several parties, I'm sure, in Argentina. And even in 2-party systems like Great Britain, you have 3 or 4 parties. In democracy, you are not univocal as the voice of science telling the truth. In democracy, you have pluralism as a value. So in the dialogue-oriented wave, the stakeholders should be listened to and activated and involved. Next picture. What is a stakeholder? For instance, I have a picture here. It's a home for the elderly. You see the intervention in the middle, the between coming in the middle. And this is a home for the elderly in, for instance, the Swedish system. Who are the stakeholders in this? The interesados in this, so to say. First of all, the clients, the old people living there. That's a stakeholder. The relatives of the clients. If I am the client, then my sons and grandsons and granddaughters are the relatives, and they are different from me, because maybe they want me to go to the home to the elderly, but I say, no, I want to stay at home. So we might have different interests. The operators in the home for the elderly, the managers, the politicians, the intervention in this case is in the public sector. The home for the elderly is a municipal home for the elderly. The voters are interesados, and also lay people are stakeholders. You should listen to all of them according to the dialogue-oriented way. This is not science. This is democracy. Was the cœur de cri, so to say. Next picture. This is not means ends rationality. This is something called communicative rationality. There should be dialogue not only on means, also on ends or goals. I mean, we can debate that in politics. We do it all the time, both goals and means, organization, underlying problem. And if I put a name on this communicative rationality idea, it would be Jürgen Habermas. It's another German. He is talking about a political philosopher like Max Weber. He talked about the ideal speech situation in English. Die ideale Sprechsituation in German. So it's not Max Weber, it's something different. Deliberative democracy is kind of an idea we have in political science nowadays. Besides representative democracy and direct democracy, nowadays we have 3 types of democracy in political science, and deliberative democracy is one of them. And this is based on communicative rationality, where all the stakeholders should have a voice and so on. So this is basically the second wave. Evaluation should be like this, carried out by stakeholders, many voices, so to say. Next picture. Now I come to new public management, the neoliberal wave. This is a large wave. It's maybe the biggest wave that it's not a tsunami, maybe a tsunami even, because it has been very influential in the world. And I start with 2 quotations here. One from Michael Power. He has written a book called The Audit Explosion. One might put the NPM ideals very simply as a desire to replace the presumed inefficiency of hierarchical bureaucracy with the presumed efficiency of markets. Well, this says something about new public management. Efficiency is the key term here, one of the key terms. It's not stakeholders and it's not scientific truth. It's efficiency that new public management is about. The next quote here is from a very best-selling book, actually. David Osborne and Ted Gabler, Reinventing Government. It came in 1992. And they say, the quotation says, catalytic government, steering rather than rowing. Steering rather than rowing. That is, politicians should steer the ship, but they shouldn't row the boat, so to say, because that should be delegated to the private sector, or it should be delegated to lower levels of the public sector, within the public sector, so to say. Steering rather than rowing. This is a fantastic phrase, actually, that tells much about new public management. Next picture. New public management was a large, or is a large, international neoliberal wave in public opinion. In public sector lingo, we call it new public management. And the one idea is management by results, or management by goal and results. And I think the basic idea here is cost effectiveness, value for money. People should have value for money. This is the most important idea. It's not the truth. It's not listening to various stakeholders. You should have value for money. And jokingly, we tend to say more bang for the buck. You understand that metaphor? A buck is $1. And this is a military metaphor, more cannons per dollar or something like that. Or this was in Soviet times, more ruble for the ruble, more ruins per ruble, so to say. It captures the basic idea in new public management. Next picture. It's an enormous wave. And I won't go through this in detail, but you can look at it. I worked a lot with this picture, actually, through many years. But let me tell you 3 things here. First of all, you see confidence in leadership, which means in new public management, they believe in leaders. Let me take number 3. The first is focus on increased effectiveness and efficiency. Number 3 there, professionalization of the leadership function. Let me take that for a university, like University of Buenos Aires, for instance. It shouldn't be the professors that should be the leaders of a university. It should be educated people from management schools, basically, economic management schools, because leadership function shouldn't be a peer, it shouldn't be a professional scientific person, it should be an economic expert, so to say. Professionalization of the leadership function is that called. Second, indirect control instead of direct control, which means, for instance, privatization, outsourcing. You recognize this. This is a wave in Latin America, of course. It's a wave in Sweden. It's a wave in the European Union. I'm sure you recognize this a lot. Delegation of responsibility and control. Well, steering, not rowing. You shouldn't row the boat. You know, you should delegate. Contracting out, and so on. And thirdly, customer involvement and orientation, which means client choice. Very important. You should have competition in the public sector between at least 2 alternatives, and the clients, the consumers, the customers should have a choice. This is very important. It's market-oriented idea. Next picture. Now I have to go to the evidence-based wave. I have 2 waves left. Evidence-based wave. I'm sure you recognize this also. It's very much on vogue now in the European Union. If you listen to politicians in this country, and if you listen to the European Union, Sweden is a member of the European Union, of course, but we are not in the Eurozone. We have our own currency. We have the crowns. We are a monarchy, by the way, one of the few monarchies in Europe. You may have heard this. The Scandinavian countries, the Netherlands, Spain is still a monarchy, and Great Britain. There are a few left, and we belong to them. And the evidence-based wave from 1995 and onwards, and it's still around. It came in social medicine, in crime prevention, in biological diversity, in evidence-based social work, in all disciplines, kind of, in all branches of government, but more in these 4 that I mentioned to begin with here. And basically, it is based upon 4 ideas. First of all, it should be scientific evidence again. It's kind of a scientific wave again, but it's different from the first one, because in this case, they should have they work with systematic reviews of what works. I will tell you something about that later. Secondly, they have constructed a hierarchy of evaluative designs, RCTs and many others. Thirdly, there is some sort of international organizations like the Campbell collaboration and the Cochrane collaboration that conduct systematic reviews. And finally, the systematic reviews of what works or further or elaborated further into guidelines for application in practical social work, for instance. Next picture. First of all, they have kind of a ranking of evaluative designs, and designs are about, designs for assessing causality, intervention effects, so to say, means effects on goals, basically, like in the first wave. But this is much more elaborated in the evidence-based wave. They have a ranking scheme, basically, for various designs. First of all, randomized controlled trials, RCTs again. They should be double-blind, single-blind, and so on. And secondly, the second best, quasi-experimental controls or matching. The third, design before-after comparison. Next picture. Cross-sectional studies, process evaluation. And at the bottom, the worst designs, so to say, in the evidence-based way is user opinion. And what is that? It's what the clients say about causality. So that's the lowest you can have in the evidence-based wave, while in the neoliberal wave, it was one of number one. I mean, clients should have a say in neoliberal. The customer is the king, kind of, in the neoliberal wave. So this is something different. This has to do with truth again, not with cost benefit or something like the neoliberal wave. Next. Systematic review. That means, for instance, that you select 40 studies carried out by RCTs, for instance, and you try to, and 40 studies, let me say, on government subsidies to industry in order to create new jobs. If I take that idea, subsidies to industry to create new jobs, and if you have 40 RCTs on that, then you compare them and try to find out what works kind of best. And then you deliver the results to the politicians and so on. We have this systematic review idea in the evidence-based wave, which you didn't have in the scientific wave, because they took RCTs one by one, so to say. But in the evidence-based wave, they summarize results of 40 or 50 or 60 or hundreds of RCTs in the Campbell collaboration or the Cochrane collaboration, international organizations that you may have in Buenos Aires. We have it in Stockholm, and we have it in Copenhagen and all the European cities. We have the Campbell collaboration and so on. So you see, there is a difference here between the first wave and this one. Next picture. Evidence-based medicine. Okay, that's one part. It came from medicine this time. Next picture. I will also show this, which I have taken from internet, in evidence-based medicine in health services. If you are a medical doctor, meeting a patient, meeting a client, so to say, then the kind of treatment you should give to this patient should be based on three things. First, best research evidence. That is randomized controlled experimentation, results from that. Secondly, in clinical expertise. But this is not called evidence, this is called expertise. I mean, the doctor herself might have been a doctor for 40 years, and she might have collected a lot of experience. It's not scientific because it's not RCT evidence, so to say, but it is clinical from working in some hospital in Buenos Aires for 40 years. So that counts, but it's not exactly evidence, but it counts anyway, in a way. And finally, patient values. Patient, they only have values. They don't have any evidence. In this case, they don't have any expertise either, which they have in new public management, NPM, the economic model. The client is the king, so to say. So this is very different. Finally, the fifth wave. Next picture. I have called this the term new public governance is used now in Europe. I think my colleague Eva Sorensen, who spoke to you the other day, Sorensen, they have pushed for this term new public governance. I like it very much. I can recommend it because it is something different from new public management. I'm talking about the fifth wave now, and I call that new public governance. Governance in English means steering. It's a pity I don't understand. I don't know the word in continental language. We have two words. We have one word for a government. We call it, auf Deutsch you say Regierung. In Great Britain and in English you have just one word for government and also steering, so to say. In German you can say Regierung und Steuerung. Steering is something else than governing, because you can have steering, you can have management also in private organizations. And this wave was originally called governance only, but now we have added new public governance to the word governance to keep it separate from new public management, because it is also, this wave is also something very different, like the evidence wave is different from new public management. Also new public governance is very different. The idea here is co-creation, co-production, collaboration, complexity, and so on. Working together, not competition. In new public management, it is competition, cost competition, and so on. In new public governance, no, it's cooperation instead. Co-production, collaboration, cooperation. Next picture. I will explain this from the bottom up, so to say, and I will start with complexity. Complexity in this speech that I give you here is kind of a professional term here. In English, complexity, like in Spanish, we have the word in Swedish too. It means intricate issue, intricate substance. And I will exemplify this by a lady seeking help from the public sector. This lady, my case here, she has 4 problems at the same time. She is unemployed. That is, she is jobless, first of all. Second, she is poor. She has no money. Thirdly, she is physically handicapped. Fourthly, she does not understand spoken Swedish, neither writing Swedish either, because she does not know the Roman alphabet. She is used to Arabic letters. She comes from Somalia, for instance, or maybe Yemen is a better case. She's an immigrant from Yemen. She has 4 problems. And she goes to the public sector to get some help. Next picture. The help she can get from the public sector in my country and I think in many, many other countries. She's unemployed and she goes to the state employment office. This is the national government who administers this. It's the state, the national state. She is poor, she has no money. And for this, she has to consult the municipal social service office or maybe some private enterprise. I mean, the Red Cross or something like that. It's another principle, so to say, for this particular service. Thirdly, she's ill with high blood pressure, bad stomach, whatever. And then she has to consult regional hospitals and healthcare in my country. You have a third different principle responsible for this. And fourthly, she does not understand spoken, written Swedish. Then she has to take some course in the municipal education office in spoken Swedish or something like that. We call this institutional complexity, which is in the former picture I told you about substantive complexity that meets institutional complexity. So what should you do in a situation like this? What should the institutions do in a situation like this? Let's take the next picture. We could also take the next picture. I can skip this picture. So we take this one. They should cooperate. The obvious thing in this case is the cooperation between the four institutions to help this woman. And this cooperation should be cross-boundary cooperation. You have to cross boundaries in order to have cooperation. It could be geographical boundaries between, the regional hospital is in one city, the municipal offices is another city, and the state office for unemployment is in a particular part of the city, and so on. She has to go to four various geographical four geographical areas, and these areas should cooperate, so to say. They should cross geographical boundaries for her, and you have to cross institutional boundaries and professional boundaries, because in some instances, for instance, the Office for Unemployment, there you have a special profession sitting there, and in the social offices for languages, you have linguistic professionals sitting there. So basically, new public governance means boundary crossing all the time. In Brazilian, I hope only in Spanish you say transversality, across. Horizontal transversality, but it could also be vertical cooperation between the top and the bottom like this. It's a mix of transversality and hierarchy. And as you understand, this is very, very complicated. And how should you evaluate all this? You can't do it by can you do it by RCTs? Well, a good thing with RCTs, randomized control experimentation, you must have a rather simple intervention in order to handle it. How can you do this? Can you do this with boundary crossing? Yes, you can. Maybe you can. But anyway, the idea here is also that the evaluation of this boundary crossing cooperation, also the evaluation of it should be boundary crossing. It should consist of the various parties in the cooperation, so to say. So it should come from people in the regional office for health. It should come from the state employment office and so on. So there should be a cooperation also in the evaluation of this. And one thing that this cooperative evaluation should be about is to try to eradicate obstacles to cooperation, because there are so many obstacles to cooperation in this case. For instance, they have different budgetary rules, for instance, that you must overcome in order to be able to cooperate. You don't have only geographical boundaries and professional boundaries, you have generational boundaries maybe, and also budgetary boundaries that you have to cross in order to cooperate. So first of all, it should be the evaluation should be stakeholder oriented. All the stakeholders in the policy should also be in the evaluation. Maybe it's possible to argue this anyway, and this is what people argue as the fifth wave. It should be the stakeholder model again, but in a different sense than before. Secondly, evaluation should be about development, not about accountability. It should not be about control, but about developing the program to make it better, so to say. We have always had, let me say, three purposes of public policy evaluation. One purpose is accountability evaluation, that is control. You have to check the various bureaucrats that they do their job properly. And if they don't, you have to punish them. Every state must have accountability evaluation. But you can also have development evaluation, that's for learning. Evaluation in order to find out things that go wrong in order that you learn. You don't punish, but you learn people to make it better the other day, maybe in 2 weeks or something like that. So this kind of evaluation should not only be stakeholder oriented, but also for learning and development. That's the second idea. And thirdly, it should be ongoing. Ongoing is a European Union term. You know, in the European Union in Brussels, they have 7 years intervention, time span is 7 years. Every program is working for 7 years, not 4 years as it is in most national states. It's 7 years. And this 7-year idea is a very good one, actually, because then if you have any effect, you may discover them in 7 years. So it's not a bad idea. But the evaluation, it should not come at the end. And it should not be in the middle. It should be ongoing, going on always, so to say, intermediately, so to say. And finally, I could also say that it could be based on statistics. It could be also based on, to some extent, RCTs. But the most important thing is dialogues between the stakeholders making the policy and the stakeholders evaluating the policy. It should be serious dialogues, that is talks. So we have it's kind of a new dialogue evaluation again, like we had in the 1970s, but this is much more elaborated. And I can tell you, this kind of idea, boundary crossing, is the thing that is supposed to save the world at the moment. I mean, the Agenda 2030 goals of the United Nations for climate mitigation is based upon this cross-boundary crossing idea. Maybe 100 various government bureaus must cooperate in order to do something about the climate. And the evaluation should also be ongoing and stakeholder oriented and so on. So this is a tremendous important idea for the moment, actually, in public policy evaluation. And it's you hear about it every day in the news. Okay, this is what I have to say. Maybe there is a last picture, maybe. Well, the next, maybe the next. Well, what I have to say, you can go back one picture, this one. I have tried to tell you about the 5 waves of evaluation: the scientific wave, the dialogical wave, the new public management wave, the evidence-based wave, and the new public governance wave. first of all, the differences between them. And the second point, the waves don't disappear. They form layer upon layer on each other. So if you look at the public sector in Western Atlantic countries, you find in some countries, you find at least traces of 3 waves. In some countries, actually, in my own country, you find traces of 5 waves. A neighboring country like Finland, for instance, to the east of us, bordering on the Soviet Union, well, excuse me, Russia, bordering on Russia, they came into this business with the 3rd wave, new public management wave. They don't have the scientific wave and the dialogical wave, so they came in as number 3. I think Italy have at least 4 waves, for instance. Spain, I'm sure, have 4 at least, and so on. And they don't disappear, but the balancing of them shifts over time. So this is the end of my speech. To me, evaluation is very diversified. I have 10 models of evaluation in my Spanish book, and in my English books too. And this is to some extent mirrored also in this 5 waves idea that I have. And now I open for discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Evert. It has been really, really interesting. I don't know if Alejandro, if you want to say something, or I can go ahead. Okay, Evert. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to pick a couple of questions from the audience, but I'm gonna start, as I'm the person here to comment your speech, to start by my question, and is the following. I've been listening to what you say and trying to match what I can see in Argentina happening and what has happened in the past, and I see very differently from what you say, that these waves leave sediments and they build layer upon layer to connect on the next wave. In Argentina, we have seen, as you have perfectly expressed, that we are okay with the goals, and we are very contested about the means to get to reach those goals. And we see that waves, instead of building upon each other, they crash. So we are stuck between waves. I have pointed down the 2 waves that I see crashing in my country, and I think in Latin America in general, which are the dialogue-oriented wave and the neoliberal wave, right? And we cannot find a way to build upon these waves to move to the next and more sophisticated, elaborated, or planned waves, which are the evidence-based wave. So I was thinking to ask you, what do you think should be the foundations to have this building upon waves? I'm not sure if I'm being clear. What do you see are the foundations of social society, of the society, of the academic area, of the government, that to have not crashing waves, but building waves that can push us to these evidence-based waves?
Okay, you want me to answer now?
Yeah, so I have a couple of questions, and
yeah, but I can take this first. I can take this
one first. Okay.
Yeah, I think thinking about evaluation and various models and waves and so on, I think you should start with type of policy. And I think there might be, this is very little developed, actually too little developed in the literature. I think it is not the case that all 5 waves could be applied to all types of policy. They are more or less good for particular types of policies and not very good for others. For instance, it seems that in the public policy research, if I take my own university, it's not very good to have competition. Well, between colleagues. You need some sort of collegial collaboration in order that it works. So maybe the evidence-based wave is better there than the new public management-based wave. I mean, if you start with type of policy, then you can say something maybe about the type of evaluation that you should have. Mm-hmm. If you have, for instance, a person with, let me say, 7 problems coming to a municipal agency, then you need some cooperation. Cooperation is much better idea there than competition. If you want to reduce, for instance, expenses of the government, it might be a good idea to have new public management in order to do that. So I think the kind of evaluation and the kind of models you apply is dependent upon the type of problem or policy that you have in your particular case. So this will be my major idea, actually. It depends, and you should start with policies, also the kind of policies, and you should start to think, what kind of evaluation could help this policy to work better? Because an evaluation is about improvement, in my opinion. It should be applied. It's not a basic science, it should be applied. It should be utilized. And if you start with the actual current situation, and if you can improve it a little bit, then it is a success.
Mm-hmm. I see.
Kind of,
I see.
yes.
Yeah.
So that's
and
one idea.
A connected question to the one I was asking previously, and I think that you in part answered in your question, comes from Alejandro Esteves, and in some part from Maximiliano, who says, do you think is the civic culture in Latin America developed enough so to require better evaluation programs? And in line with that question, do you think that the new public governance of and co-creation of public policies are possible with low levels of citizen participation and a very incipient development of civil society, as is the case in Latin America? So these are the foundations that I was asking for. Do you think that we have the things that are needed so that we can make evaluation part of the decision-making process?
Thank you. This is also an interesting question. I think some models works better in democratic societies where you have people participation. For instance, the stakeholder models, the second
dialogue-oriented.
Dialogue-oriented models. You need some sort of public participation for that. Whereas the science-driven model, it could be applied in dictatorships, I think. You don't have, I mean, it's the professors, they do it. It's the expertise that do it. And maybe China could, for instance, be very good at this in a way. So I think some models works better, or it might be a precondition for some of the models that you have some sort of civic society that participates. Mm-hmm. It's also the same with the fifth one. The new public governance wave, collaboration. Well, evaluation is difficult always, but it may work better. I have another idea. I don't know Latin America at all. Only what I read in newspapers. But I have noticed one thing between, let me say, social democracy or socialism in Latin America and in Europe. In Latin America, you seem very, well, let me say, the social democrats in Europe, they are not in favor of direct action at all. It should be parliamentary democratic interventions. Everything should be elected upon, and the electors, the parliamentarians, should do the job and so. And direct action, like for instance, that you occupy the houses, and that you have many strikes and so on, they are not actually in favor of this among the European democratic societies, not even in Italy, I think, any longer. And if you take the North Europeans, if you take the Germans and the Swedes, they are not in favor of this. They started another way almost 60 or 70 years ago. They are not in favor of strikes either. They are not my strikes, not much direct action. So you have in Latin America, this is an amateurist view. You have so much direct action in a way. It's not actually about evaluation, it's about activity. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not properly channeled, right? So all that energy
and it's not channeled into the
actual action.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So it's difficult in some Latin American countries.
I guess that now with the new wave of data, big data, and all the new information system that we are going through, evaluation is going to make a big turn as well. So I'm sure that we will see a fifth, an enhanced wave coming now that technology has so much crossed everyday's life. So I would like to know what's your opinion on this, and with this we need to finish the session because we are past the time.
Yeah, you are mentioning something very interesting, big data. I didn't mention it, and there is something new with this, and it is coming all over the world, the big data idea, and they take it up in evaluation conferences also, but I don't have it among my waves. Maybe this is a sixth wave or something like that. Could be. I have to think about it.
It's going to merge into the different waves.
Or is it going to merge into the, whatever, maybe the science-driven wave or something? Is it going in there? I'm not sure. Another thing that also could be a candidate for a sixth wave would be theory-based evaluation. That is intervention theory-based evaluation. You start with the theory inherent in the intervention, because in every intervention you have kind of a theory, what is supposed to work against the target groups, so that the target groups get involved or get employed and so on. There is in every intervention some sort of theory, practical theory. Mm-hmm. And a theory-based wave could take that seriously and try to assess kind of the theory of every type of intervention. I haven't really touched upon that either in my...
A lot of work to do further. Definitely a lot to do in the many
Why don't you send me an email? Why don't you send me an email after this?
No, sure, we'll do.
So I get your address. Yes.
Thank you, Evert. It's been a pleasure, honestly, and it's been very enlightening to see all this that we've heard of and think of, but having a conceptual framework to have it ordered, it has been great for me, and I'm sure that for the audience as well. So from my side, thank you very much, and I hope that we keep in touch. So Maximiliano, Alejandro, if you want to say some closing comments.
Thank you.
Yes, Evert, I will thank you a lot. I've been using your books for 25 years. So for me, it's a very, very great moment to have you in this webinar. Thanks a lot, and we will write you soon. Thanks.
Yes,
Evert.
yes, please. Thank you for inviting me. This is so nice of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm so impressed.
Thank you, Professor Vedung and Professor Guadalupe Dorna. Thank you for your comments. It has been a pleasure for us. That was perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a nice spring.
Have a nice winter.
Thank you.
Thank you.